It started at that goddamn dinner table. We were in Miami, some overpriced beach resort her dad insisted on booking. It was supposed to be a family vacation, a chance to unwind. Our 7th wedding anniversary fell right in the middle of it. I thought maybe we'd sneak away from her overbearing parents and spoiled siblings, just for a night, something romantic, just her and me. Turns out, I was the only one with that thought. On the first night, we all gathered at the resort's rooftop restaurant. Sunset view, linen tablecloths, the works. I walked up with Olivia, my wife of 7 years, and before I could pull a chair out for her, her mother, Darlene, the queen of condescension, pointed to a separate table by the corner, next to the service station. "Jason, honey, why don't you sit over there?" she said, her fake smile glued in place like a Barbie mask. I laughed, genuinely thinking it was a joke. But then her dad, Bruce, added, "It's just better this way." Better for who? Olivia didn't even look at me. She adjusted her designer sunglasses on her head and said, "It's just their way, babe. Don't make it weird." Don't make it weird? I stood there for a second, stunned, as everyone just went back to their menus like this was perfectly normal. No one even looked at me. Not her sister Chloe, not her brother Matt, not even her 10-year-old niece, who used to beg me to play mermaids in the pool. So I sat at that damn table, alone. Waiter dropped a breadbasket in front of me like I was some loner who wandered in off the beach. And that was night one. For the next 3 days, I was a ghost. At breakfast, they'd order without me. During day trips, I'd find out they'd gone while I was still getting dressed. Olivia would shrug it off every time. They just like their routines, Jay. You know how they are. Yeah, I knew how they were. But what burned me was how she was. No defense. No, hey, this is my husband. No loyalty. By day 4, I was done playing dumb. I started watching her closely. Her screen time went through the roof, always turning her phone upside down when I walked in, giggling at messages she never shared. And her perfume? Changed. She started using this heavy vanilla scent that she hated before. I asked her once and she said, "It's nothing. Just wanted to try something new." But that smell clung to her every night when she got back to the room at 1 or 2 a.m., saying she was with Chloe at the spa. Spa? At 2 in the morning? The night before our anniversary, I tested her. "Let's do something tomorrow, just you and me," I said casually as she scrolled through her phone, lounging on the bed like a damn queen. A boat ride. Dinner. Just us. She didn't even look up. "Ugh, babe, we have plans. Chloe booked something for all the girls." I nodded. Right. The girls. That night, I didn't sleep. Instead, I watched. I listened. At 1:37 a.m., I heard the soft click of the hotel door. I got up 5 minutes later, followed her at a distance down the hallway. She didn't even flinch. She didn't expect me to care anymore. She walked straight into room 726. That room wasn't Chloe's. I'd made sure of it. I didn't kick down the door. I didn't scream. Not yet. I went back to our room, calm as ever, and waited. The next morning was our anniversary. Her whole family gathered at the breakfast terrace, dressed like it was Easter Sunday. Olivia showed up late, wearing a tight red dress I'd never seen before. She kissed my cheek like I was some distant cousin and said, "Happy anniversary, babe. You want eggs or waffles?" I smiled. "Oh," I smiled big. "Neither," I said. I already ate. Had breakfast in room 726. The look on her face? Priceless. Her mother dropped her fork. Bruce turned pale. Chloe choked on her mimosa. And I stood up, slow, steady, letting the silence crawl over them like fog. "You all like to pretend I'm invisible?" I said. "Perfect. I have my own way too." Then I pulled the folded photographs from my pocket. Snapshots I took last night. Olivia, tangled in sheets with some random dude, his tattooed back on full display. The timestamp glared like a death sentence. I placed them on the table, one by one. Nobody touched them. Nobody said a word. And then the panic set in. I didn't wait for anyone to speak. Their silence was louder than any scream, and it filled the terrace like thick smoke. Olivia's eyes darted from the photos to me, then to her parents, searching for an escape, for backup, for something. But nobody moved. Even her dad, the control freak, looked like someone had knocked the wind out of him. She stood up suddenly, knocking her glass over. "What the hell is wrong with you?" she hissed, trying to keep her voice down, but failing. "You're crazy. You went through my stuff? You followed me." I raised an eyebrow. "That's what you're upset about? Not the part where you've been fooling around behind my back for God knows how long." She didn't answer. She was good at playing the victim, always had been. The waterworks started right on cue, one tear rolling down her cheek, chin up, like I was the monster here. You don't get it, she snapped, brushing past the table and grabbing my wrist, trying to drag me away from the stunned crowd. You don't know what it's been like. You've been distant, boring, obsessed with work. I needed something more. I needed to feel alive again. I yanked my arm back. So your answer was some punk in room 726? That's your solution? Betrayal. She rolled her eyes. Rolled her goddamn eyes. He listens to me, she said coldly. He actually sees me. You? You treat me like a checklist. Flowers on Valentine's, date night on Fridays, repeat. That's not love, Jason. That's routine. My jaw clenched so tight it hurt. You want chaos? Drama? Then congrats. You've got it now. Her father finally stood. Let's all calm down now. Save it. I snapped. I still locked on Olivia. You all knew, didn't you? No one answered. But I could tell. They knew. That's why they isolated me. That's why they avoided eye contact and whispered behind my back. They weren't just passive. They were complicit. I laughed. Not because it was funny. Because it was insane. 7 years of marriage, and this is how it ends? Not with a fight. Not with counseling. But with a vacation and a side order of betrayal. I turned and walked off the terrace, down the steps, through the lobby, and into the street. I didn't take my phone. I didn't take my wallet. I just walked. The heat hit me hard, but it felt real, more real than anything in that cursed resort. I sat on a bench by the beach for what felt like hours, watching people laugh, couples holding hands, kids digging in the sand, all of them oblivious to the fact that my entire world had just imploded. My phone buzzed eventually, over and over. Olivia, her mom, even her brother. I didn't answer a single one. When I finally got back to the hotel, the room was empty. She was gone, but she left a note on the dresser. One sentence, scrawled in that looping handwriting I used to love. I didn't mean to hurt you. Bullshit. She meant every minute of it. Every lie. Every late night. Every time she looked me in the eye and told me she loved me while someone else's cologne clung to her skin. I tore the note in half, then in quarters, then into tiny shreds that floated to the floor like confetti. Happy anniversary. I spent the next couple of hours pacing around the hotel room, trying to sort through my thoughts, but it was impossible. My mind felt like it was spiraling out of control, drowning in questions I didn't have the answers to. How long had this been going on? Who was he? Was it just him, or were there others? And why had Olivia, my wife, my partner, done this to me? I heard the door creak open, and I froze. Olivia stepped inside, her eyes red from crying, but there was something about her that didn't quite add up. She walked slowly towards me, her shoulders slumped like she expected me to forgive her without a fight. But I wasn't that guy anymore. Jay, please, she whispered, her voice thick with fake sincerity. I'm so sorry. I was confused. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. You have to believe me. I couldn't look at her. I couldn't even stomach hearing her voice. The woman I thought I knew had just destroyed everything we'd built. I'd spent years thinking she was my rock, my one constant in this crazy world. And now, I was just some fool who didn't even know when his own wife had turned into a stranger. Don't, I finally muttered, my voice low and hoarse. Don't act like this is just some mistake. You knew what you were doing. You've been lying to me for God knows how long. And now you want me to believe that you're sorry, that it was just a confused moment? I'm not stupid, Olivia. She flinched, as if my words had physically struck her. But I didn't care. This wasn't about her feelings anymore. This was about me. About my dignity. About the trust she had shattered without a second thought. I didn't know what to do, she said, her voice shaky, almost pleading. I've been unhappy for a long time, Jay. And you, she trailed off, clearly struggling to find the right words. You've been distant. You've been so caught up in work and everything else. I didn't know how else to cope. I needed someone to remind me that I was still attractive, desired. Her words stung more than they should have, because deep down, I'd seen it. The signs, the late nights, the strange texts, the way she'd act cold and distant, like I was some inconvenience in her life. But I had refused to acknowledge it. I had ignored the sinking feeling in my stomach because I wanted to believe that our love was stronger than anything. I shook my head, my fists clenched tight at my sides. So, instead of talking to me, instead of being honest, you just went and got yourself tangled up in some mess with some random guy? Her eyes welled up with tears, but I could see the cracks in her facade. The tears weren't real anymore. They were part of her performance. Part of the act she had been rehearsing for weeks. I'm sorry, Jay. I'm so sorry, she repeated, but her voice lacked conviction. I never wanted to hurt you. You have to believe that. I could feel the anger bubbling up inside me. It burned. It was the kind of rage that comes from being humiliated, from realizing that the person you loved more than anything in the world didn't just break your heart, they stomped on it, ground it into the dirt, and walked away without a second thought. You never wanted to hurt me? I spat, stepping closer to her. Then why did you? Why did you keep hurting me, over and over again? You think you can just throw out a couple of tears, say sorry, and everything will go back to normal? You think I'm that stupid? She took a step back, clearly caught off guard by the intensity of my anger. But it didn't matter anymore. I was done being the nice guy. I was done being the fool who always gave second chances. I'm done, Olivia, I said, my voice steady, even though everything inside me was shaking. This isn't about some mistake you made. This is about you making a choice. And you chose him. Not me. You made your bed. Now you lie in it. Her face twisted in disbelief. Are you serious? After everything we've been through? Everything we've been through? I repeated, my laugh bitter. What we've been through is a lie. Everything we've been through is a fairy tale you wrote, and I was too blind to see the ending. I watched as she stood there, broken and desperate, but it didn't make a difference. I wasn't going to be the guy who forgave her for this. Not this time. I'm leaving, I said, turning towards the door. I didn't look back as I grabbed my bag and walked out, the sound of her crying fading behind me like background noise. The world outside felt strangely calm, as if it had been waiting for me to make that choice. The decision was simple, even if it felt impossible. The truth hit me all at once. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't hurt. I was relieved. Relieved that I didn't have to keep pretending. Relieved that I didn't have to stay in a marriage where I wasn't wanted. I didn't need her. Not anymore. And I wasn't going to beg for a love that was never mine to begin with. I spent the night in a dingy motel a few blocks away from the resort, sitting on the edge of the bed, staring at the cracked walls. I hadn't even bothered to turn on the TV. The silence in the room was deafening, but somehow it was exactly what I needed. My thoughts raced in circles, each one pulling me deeper into the realization of what had just happened. I knew I couldn't go back. Not to that life, not to her. There was no repairing what had been broken. Olivia had made her choice, and so had I. But it didn't stop the ache in my chest. It didn't erase the nagging feeling that I was somehow complicit in my own misery, because, deep down, I had allowed it to happen. I had ignored the signs, made excuses, convinced myself that love was enough. But love wasn't enough. Not when the person you trusted the most shatters that trust without a second thought. I reached for my phone, scrolling through the texts from Olivia. There were dozens of them, pleading, apologizing, begging me to come back. But I didn't even read them. I didn't care. Each message felt like another stab in the back. By morning, I had made up my mind. I called a lawyer. I didn't know what to expect from the divorce proceedings, but I knew I couldn't waste any more time waiting for Olivia to come to her senses. There was no coming back from this. The hotel room felt suffocating as I packed my things and walked out. I left the resort behind without a single glance back. My car was still parked in the lot, but I didn't drive it to the airport. I took a cab instead, heading to a place I knew I could find some peace. The city was different. Everything felt more vibrant. The streets seemed to buzz with life, a stark contrast to the stillness I'd left behind in the hotel. As I sat in the cab, I realized just how long it had been since I'd felt truly alive. Since I'd felt like me. Olivia had taken that from me, but she wasn't going to take my future. I wasn't going to let her destroy everything I had left. I wasn't going to be her punching bag, her fool anymore. When I finally reached the small apartment I'd rented, I collapsed onto the couch, exhausted but strangely free. The weight I had been carrying for so long, months, maybe even years, was gone. It wasn't a clean break, but it was a start. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe again. I thought about the wedding ring I had left on the counter back at the hotel, the symbol of everything that was supposed to be. It was just a piece of metal now, a reminder of the lies, the betrayal, and the woman I thought I knew. But as I sat there, alone, I realized that it no longer mattered. What mattered was that I had walked away. And as I closed my eyes, for the first time in days, I finally felt at peace with the decision I'd made. She had her life. I had mine. And that was all that mattered. The next few days were a blur, a mix of numbness and occasional clarity. I started to get the hang of being alone again, of not having to tiptoe around someone who would just as easily throw me under the bus when it suited her. It was liberating in a way I hadn't expected. The chaos she brought into my life slowly faded, and with each passing hour, I began to realize just how much of myself I had lost in that relationship. The divorce papers came a week later. I read through them, carefully, my hands steady as I skimmed the legal jargon. There was no going back now. The decision had been made. But still, I couldn't shake the lingering thoughts about Olivia, about what we had, or thought we had. It was hard to believe that everything we'd built, every promise, every moment, was just a facade for her to hide behind while she built something else with someone else. The first time I spoke to her after leaving the resort was almost 2 weeks later. She called me late one night, and for a moment, I hesitated before answering. "Jason," her voice crackled through the phone, strained but familiar. "Please, can we talk? I know you're angry, but I need you to listen to me." I closed my eyes. Her voice was the same, but everything else felt different. This was no longer the woman I had loved. This was a woman begging for something she didn't deserve. "I don't know what there is to say, Olivia," I replied, my voice cold. "You've said enough already. You've shown me everything I need to know. I messed up, Jason. I'm sorry. I was wrong. I never wanted to hurt you. I never wanted to lose you." It was a rehearsed apology, the kind you say because you know you've run out of excuses, not because you're actually sorry. It felt empty, hollow, and I could hear the desperation in her voice. But none of it mattered to me anymore. "You lost me the moment you decided to betray me," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Don't apologize now, Olivia. You had plenty of chances to make things right. You just chose not to. This isn't about a mistake. This is about you deciding to hurt me over and over again." I heard her take a shaky breath. "I wasn't happy, Jason. I didn't feel seen. I was lonely. I didn't know how to fix it. I felt a flicker of something, anger, maybe, or just sheer frustration. You could have fixed it by talking to me. You could have told me the truth, but instead you chose to lie. You chose to cheat. I'm not the one to blame here, Olivia. You made your choices." There was a long pause. Then she spoke again, this time softer, almost pleading. "Do you still love me?" The question hung in the air, and I found myself frozen. It was the question that always seemed to follow the end of a relationship, the one that makes you question everything you thought you knew. But I already knew the answer. "I thought I did," I replied, the words tasting bitter. "But now? I don't think I ever truly knew you." "I'm sorry, Jason," she whispered. "I'll never forgive myself for what I did." "Neither will I said flatly. "But that doesn't change anything. We're done, Olivia. You made your choice." There was a sound, a soft sob, but I didn't stay on the line long enough to hear more. I hung up, and for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel the weight of her betrayal pressing down on me. I felt free. It didn't matter anymore. What mattered now was moving forward. I wasn't going to let her take any more of my time or my energy. I wasn't going to keep looking back, wondering if there was some part of her I could salvage. There wasn't. And I was done trying to fix what was beyond repair. The divorce went through smoothly after that. The finality of it, of seeing her name on the paperwork one last time, felt like a door slamming shut on a chapter of my life I didn't even recognize anymore. I had been a different person back then, the man who believed in the fairy tale. Now, I was someone else. Someone stronger. Someone who wasn't going to let anyone walk all over him again. I started doing things for myself, small things at first. Hitting the gym harder, taking weekend trips, reconnecting with friends I hadn't seen in years. I started to rebuild, piece by piece. It wasn't easy. There were days when the loneliness crept in, when the memories of Olivia would flood back in waves, but they no longer had power over me. I had control over my own life again. As the months passed, I found myself thinking less and less about her, about the lies, about the betrayal. It wasn't that I had forgiven her, because I never would. It was that I had learned to let go, to move on. And for the first time in a long time, I was truly at peace with it. I didn't need closure. I didn't need her to apologize again. I had done the hardest thing, walked away. And that was enough. Now, it was my turn to live for me. And I wasn't going to waste another minute looking back. A few months passed, and I kept my head down, focusing on building a life I could be proud of again. The numbness that had settled in after the divorce began to fade, replaced with a quiet sense of accomplishment. It wasn't the life I had once imagined, but it was a life I could live with. A life I had fought for. I started to reconnect with parts of myself I had long buried. I went back to my old hobbies, the things that made me feel alive before Olivia and everything she had taken with her. I picked up the guitar again, something I had put aside during our marriage. The sound of the strings felt like freedom, like reclaiming a part of myself that had been silenced for far too long. I also began dating again. Casual at first. Nothing serious. But the truth was, I wasn't really ready. I wasn't sure I could ever trust someone like I had trusted her. Olivia had set the bar so low, and the idea of being vulnerable again felt terrifying. Still, I met a few women. A few good dates, but nothing that sparked anything close to what I'd had with her. But I kept going. Because I knew, deep down, that I had to. Not for them, but for me. I had to prove to myself that I wasn't broken. That my future wasn't defined by a past I couldn't change. One night, a couple of months after everything had settled, I ran into Olivia at a local cafe. She looked different. More put together, like she had finally found some sense of peace. She was with a guy, younger, fresh-faced, clearly smitten by her. They were laughing, holding hands, and for a moment, I almost didn't recognize her. She saw me, too. Her eyes widened, and for a split second, I saw something in them, a flicker of guilt, maybe even shame. But she quickly masked it, putting on that same false smile that had so often masked the truth. I was going to turn around, walk out, but something inside me stopped me. I didn't need to run from her anymore. I didn't need to avoid the truth. So I walked straight to the counter, ordered my coffee, and pretended she didn't exist. For a moment, I thought she might come over, apologize again, ask if we could talk. But she didn't. Instead, she just sat there, chatting with her new guy, oblivious to the fact that I was even in the room. I sipped my coffee slowly, watching them. I felt no anger, no desire for revenge. I didn't even feel relief. It was just nothing. A quiet peace. When I finished my drink, I got up to leave. As I walked out of the cafe, I glanced over my shoulder. She was still sitting there, her hand intertwined with his, laughing at something he said. I didn't feel a pang of jealousy, not even a flicker of longing. It wasn't my problem anymore. She wasn't my problem anymore. I walked away, knowing that this chapter of my life had truly come to an end. That moment of closure, of seeing her moving on with someone else, was exactly what I needed to fully close the door. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't hurt. I was just free. And as I walked down the street, the weight that had been with me for so long finally seemed to lift. It wasn't just about her anymore. It was about me reclaiming the parts of myself I had lost, about learning to trust again, not anyone else, but myself. I didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid of it, because I was finally starting to live for myself. And that was all I needed. The weeks that followed were filled with small victories. The kind of victories that weren't visible to anyone else, but to me, they meant everything. I was rediscovering my life piece by piece. There were still tough moments, nights when the loneliness crept in, when memories of Olivia would come rushing back, but they were fewer, and I learned how to handle them. I was no longer defined by the betrayal. I wasn't drowning in the past anymore. I started taking more risks, doing things I'd never allowed myself to do before. I took a weekend trip upstate, just to get away from everything. It was the kind of spontaneous decision I would have never made when I was married. Back then, everything had to be planned, controlled. But now, I was figuring out how to embrace the chaos, the uncertainty of life. The air felt different when I was out there in the mountains, away from the noise of the city. It gave me space to think, to clear my head. As I hiked to the top of a ridge, the view sprawling out before me, I couldn't help but smile. There was something about being alone in that moment that felt right. Like I was meant to be here, just me and the world. When I got back to the city, I started making more connections. Old friends reached out, and I reconnected with people I hadn't spoken to in years. My life was slowly being rebuilt, and it wasn't the same as before, but it was mine. And that made all the difference. One night, I got a call from my old buddy, Eric. We'd been close in college, but I had lost touch with him after Olivia and I got together. He'd been there when I first met her, and when things had gone south, he'd always been the guy who reminded me to stay true to myself. "Hey man, it's been too long," Eric said when I answered. "What do you say we grab a drink? Catch up?" I hesitated for a moment. It had been a while since I'd gone out for something as simple as a drink, just to enjoy a conversation. But I agreed.